My older sister and her 6 kids treated my home like a public park, so I moved in secret and let them walk into a ghost house. I'll never forget that final Tuesday. I walked through my front door to find damp, mildew-scented towels draped over my Italian leather sofa. 3 of them were just tossed there, dripping into the cushions like someone had simply surrendered to the mess mid-shore. The bathroom door was swung wide, emergency steam still fogging up the vanity mirror. My expensive French shampoo was tossed on its side in the porcelain tub, the bottle nearly hollowed out, even though I'd just grabbed it from the store 5 days ago. This was the 9th time in 4 weeks. My sister, Sarah, had a key one I'd given her 3 years ago for a legitimate apartment emergency. Back then, her oldest, Ava, was still in kindergarten, and Sarah actually seemed to have her life in some sort of order. That metal key was supposed to be for watering my ferns while I traveled for the firm or in case I ever got locked out in the rain. Instead, she'd been treating my apartment as her personal secret day spa while I was grinding away at the office. The first time it happened, I thought I was losing my mind. I'd left that morning with every pillow fluffed and in its place. I returned to find apple juice boxes in my recycling bin and the Disney Channel still blaring on my TV. Sarah admitted to it with a breezy laugh when I called her, as if it was some quirky, charming sisterly trait. The 6 kids were going stir-crazy, Evelyn, and our HVAC is completely shot. I figured you wouldn't mind a little company since you were at your desk anyway. But I did mind. I told her I minded. She gave me a panic-free promise that it wouldn't happen again. And yet, there were the towels. There was my premium Greek yogurt missing from the fridge. There were sticky, sugary handprints on my sliding glass terrace door, and someone had been on my MacBook, leaving it open to bizarre YouTube toy reviews. My utility bill had spiked by $65 last month because Sarah clearly thought my place was a great after-school lounge. I took a sharp photo of the soggy towels and sent it. Me? Again? This is too much. 3 gray dots appeared on my screen, then vanished, then danced again. Sarah typed, "Sorry. Emergency. Ava had a massive breakdown at the elementary school and I just needed a quiet sanctuary to settle her down. You know how sensitive she gets." Ava was 9. She was sensitive because Sarah never laid down a single boundary, but I'd learned that pointing out her parenting flaws only turned me into the family's heartless narcissist. I'd spent 30 years learning that staying quiet was the only way to survive. "You can't keep doing this, Sarah," I texted, my thumbs trembling as I typed. "I need my key back by Friday. No excuses." Her response was nearly instantaneous. "Evelyn, don't be so dramatic. It's not like I'm hosting a gala in your foyer. You're at your desk at the firm all day anyway. What's the harm in us being there?" "That isn't the point," I fired back. "The point is privacy. The point is respect." "Fine," she replied with a virtual eye roll. "I'll be more cautious." She wouldn't be. We both knew the steps to this tired dance. I sat on my sofa, tossed the damp towels onto the hardwood, and stared at the popcorn ceiling. At 31 years old, I was still letting my big sister stomp through my boundaries like they were made of cheap tissue paper. My mother would have lectured me on being compassionate. After all, Sarah had 6 kids under the age of 13. She was drowning in the chaos of motherhood, her house a perpetual zone of noise and sticky surfaces. She needed a village, or so she claimed. "Family supports family," Mom always said. But apparently, that proverb never included the part where family respects family, too. I was tired of paying the emotional tax for Sarah's lack of planning. 3 days of eerie silence followed. I thought maybe, just maybe, the message had finally sunk in. I was wrong. The next violation hit that Thursday. I had transitioned to working from home that week to finalize some high-stakes legal reports that required absolute silence and a steady stream of caffeine. Around 2:15 inches the afternoon, I heard the deadbolt slide. I was in my sanctuary, my bedroom with noise-canceling headphones on, buried in a complex Excel sheet. I didn't register the metallic thud immediately. Then, through the music, came the high-pitched squeals of children and the heavy scent of peanut butter. I ripped my headphones off and marched into the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah's 3 youngest, Liam, Noah, and little Sophie, were sprawled across my expensive Persian rug with neon markers and my premium printer paper. My paper. They'd found the heavy-duty ream I kept tucked in the mahogany cabinet and were using it to illustrate a chaotic war between dragons and space marines. Sarah was in the kitchen, casually slapping together sandwiches like she owned the deed to the place. "What on earth are you doing here?" My voice was colder than I intended, sharp enough to cut through the domestic noise. Sarah turned, startled, a butter knife frozen in midair. "Oh, I thought you'd be in the city at the office today. Your car wasn't in its usual spot." "I'm working from home, Sarah. You can't just bypass my privacy and walk into my life whenever you feel like it. The kids were starving, and our kitchen sink is backed up with some gross sludge. It's a literal disaster over there," she said, gesturing toward my pantry with a jar of expensive organic almond butter she'd discovered. "We'll be out of your hair in 30 minutes, I swear. Just let them finish their drawings." "Sarah, this is my workspace. I am literally on the clock." "What? You're going to look me in the eye and tell me I can't feed my own children?" She used that toxic tone, the one designed to make me feel like a monster. The family drama was her preferred weapon. Little Liam looked up from his drawing, his eyes wide and glassy, absorbing the heat in the room. I took a deep breath and lowered my volume, trying to maintain some level of professional decorum. "You have to ask first. You can't just invade my security whenever it's convenient for your schedule." I did ask. I sent a text. I checked my phone, which had been face down on my mahogany desk. There it was. A message from 14 minutes ago. "Stopping by for a bit. Sink is dead." Not a request. Not a question. A notification of an impending invasion. Asking means waiting for a yes, Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She sighed, the sound of an exhausted martyr, and finished the sandwiches with aggressive efficiency. She herded the kids out within 20 minutes, leaving behind neon marker stains on my rug and a hollowed-out pantry. But the damage was done. The air felt heavy, contaminated by her entitlement. I couldn't focus for a single second for the rest of the day. My apartment didn't feel like my fortress anymore. It felt like a shared resource I was being taxed for without my consent. That was the moment I realized the survival of my sanity depended on something more than just a conversation. It was time for a permanent closure to this open-door policy. I changed my locks that very weekend. I didn't send a warning text, didn't seek permission, and didn't consult the family council. I just opened my browser and hired a professional locksmith who charged me a premium $65 emergency weekend fee. The sound of him drilling into the metal felt like an act of war, but also like a prayer being answered. Afterward, the new brass keys sat heavy and cold in my palm, two gleaming copies that belonged solely to me. I felt a nauseating mixture of intense guilt and sudden, sharp relief. I knew my sister well enough to know this wouldn't just be a conversation. It would be a nuclear detonation. The explosion arrived on Monday evening. My phone lit up with Sarah's name, and I watched it vibrate across the coffee table until it went to voicemail. Then she called again. And a third time. On the fifth persistent attempt, I finally answered. "Did you change your locks?" No greeting. No "how was your day?" Just a razor-sharp accusation. "Yes," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "Are you actually kidding me right now, Evelyn? You're locking me out?" "Your own sister." "I'm not locking you out of my life, Sarah. I'm locking my front door because you refuse to respect my boundaries. You kept coming in without an invitation. It's an emergency key. What happens if there's a fire and I need to reach you?" "Then you call me like a normal adult," I countered. "This is absolutely unbelievable. I never thought you'd be this selfish." That word selfish hit exactly where she intended it to. In our house, being called selfish was the ultimate sin. It meant you weren't sacrificing enough, weren't being a doormat for the sake of the collective, and weren't living up to the standard of constant availability our mother had modeled until she was a shell of a person. "It's my apartment, Sarah," I said, my voice trembling now. "I'm allowed to control who walks through my living room. I'm family. That should give me a right to your space. It doesn't give you a right to treat my home like your second address." She slammed the phone down. I knew what was coming next. Exactly 1 hour later, the higher court called. My mother. "Evelyn, honey, what is this I'm hearing about you and your sister?" Mom's voice was that soft, disappointed lilt that felt worse than a scream. "Did she tell you she's been using my place like a spa several times a week, Mom? She mentioned you changed your locks. That seems like a very toxic overreaction to family being family." "Mom, she was bringing 6 kids in while I was trying to work. I asked her to stop, and she ignored me. She's under so much pressure right now." Evelyn. Andrew works those 60-hour weeks, and those kids are a handful. She just needs a little grace. I've given her a bucket of grace. She drank it all and asked for more. Don't be so cold, Momsy hid. Family is supposed to be the one place where you don't have to ask for permission. We went in circles for 25 minutes, a dizzying family drama where I was slowly being painted as the narcissist villain of the story. I felt hollowed out by the end of it, my certainty scraped away like old paint. Maybe I was the broken one. Maybe normal families didn't mind their siblings using their laptops and eating their food. But then I looked at the sticky fingerprints still on my terrace door, and the anger resettled in my chest like a cold stone. 4 days passed in a tense, frozen silence. I should have known the peace was just the eye of the storm. On Friday evening, a knock echoed through my door, not the polite ring of the doorbell, but a heavy, rhythmic thud that rattled the doorframe in its hinges. I looked through the peephole to find Sarah standing there, flanked by all 6 kids like a brood of restless ducklings. She was holding a large, steaming glass casserole dish. I opened the door only a few inches, keeping the heavy security chain engaged. "What's this, Sarah?" "A peace offering," she said, tilting her head with a practiced, weary smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kids really wanted to see their Auntie Evelyn. "Can we please just come in? Don't make this a bigger production than it needs to be." I hesitated, the guilt trip already starting to weigh on me, then I unhooked the chain. The kids surged in instantly, a chaotic wave of noise heading straight for my white velvet sofa. Ava, the 9-year-old, snatched my remote off the table before I could even blink. "Shoes off, please," I called out, but Sarah just waved her hand dismissively. "They're fine, honey. The rug probably needs a good vacuuming anyway." I counted to 10 in my head, feeling my pulse in my ears. "What exactly are you apologizing for, Sarah?" "For using your sanctuary, a bit too much," she said, sliding the casserole onto my marble counter. She didn't wait for an invite, she opened my fridge to clear a spot for it. "This is my 5-cheese lasagna. The one you used to crave. So, are we good? Can we put this behind us?" I looked at her, then at the 6 kids who had already hijacked the TV and were shouting over which cartoon to watch. This didn't feel like an apology. It felt like a tactical maneuver. A narcissist classic. Show up with hot food and small children as human buffers so the other person can't possibly stay angry without looking like a monster. It was a forced reconciliation through sheer physical presence. "We're okay," I said slowly, choosing my words with the precision of a session in court, "but I'm still not giving you a copy of the new locks." "That's final." Her smile went tight and brittle. I figured as much. She stayed for exactly 40 minutes, herding the kids out once they'd scattered crumbs across my floor. I ate a square of the lasagna that night, and it was delicious, which somehow made me feel even more manipulated. Why could she be so thoughtful in ways that cost her nothing, a tray of pasta, while being so utterly heartless in the ways that actually mattered? I thought we'd reached an agreement to disagree, but the true test of my survival was only just beginning. The harassment didn't simply stop. It evolved into a sophisticated campaign of digital probing. Sarah began a relentless series of check-in texts that were clearly designed as stress tests for my boundaries. "Evelyn, do you still have that high-end air mattress I lent you last summer?" Followed by, "The kids are begging for a slumber party at your place. Noah wants to order extra pepperoni." Then came the most transparent move of all. "I gave your personal cell to my friend Chloe. Her sister is desperate for a unit in your complex. Can you give her a private tour?" Each notification was like a sonar pulse, Sarah searching for a structural weakness in my resolve. I kept my responses strictly professional, like a cold legal deposition brief, detached, and utterly non-committal. I refused to give her a single inch of leverage. But when the digital stalking failed, she pivoted back to physical intrusion. She'd show up at my gate under the guise of being in the neighborhood or claiming the 6 kids had drawn me elaborate miss you cards that couldn't possibly wait. Once, she demanded to use my powder room because little Liam was in the middle of a potty emergency, completely ignoring the perfectly clean Starbucks on the next block. Every visit was a calculated heist of my mental peace. She'd linger in my entryway, her eyes darting around like she was looking for a spare set of keys. I was forced to adopt a desperate new survival tactic, pretending my own home was a tomb. I'd stand in my darkened master bedroom, my heart thundering in my ears, watching Sarah's silhouette through the heavy blinds as she hammered on my door for 10 minutes straight. It was humiliating a successful, grown professional hiding in the dark from her own sibling. You have to be clinical about this, Evelyn, my friend Brenda advised over a glass of wine. Stop with the maybe and the later. You need to dictate the closure of this chapter once and for all. So, I sent the manifesto text. I laid out the law. No unannounced pop-ins. No kids without a 48-hour session of notice. No treating my private security as her personal storage unit. Her reply arrived 4 hours later, dripping with toxic vitriol. Wow. I didn't realize I was such a monstrous burden to you. I'll make sure to never disturb your precious sanctuary again. That was the narcissist's classic pivot, shifting from the aggressor to the wounded party. 2 weeks of blissful, icy silence followed. Then, I returned from a late night at the firm to find a handwritten note taped to my door. Evelyn, I've tried calling. It's Mom's 65th birthday dinner. This is vital. Call me now. I didn't reach for the phone. I knew the guilt trip was being fueled up for a long-distance strike. The 65th birthday dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. We were crammed into a corner booth at an upscale steakhouse, the air thick with the suffocating weight of unaddressed family drama. Andrew, Sarah's husband, wouldn't even meet my eyes, his stony silence confirming that Sarah had spent the last month painting me as the family's resident heartless villain. The 6 kids were a chaotic whirlwind, spilling sodas and climbing the leather upholstery while my mother tried to force me into a conversation about my dating life, anything to paper over the toxic cracks in the room. I made a flimsy excuse about a morning filing and escaped before the candles were even lit. The final breaking point snapped on a sweltering Saturday in September. I had spent the day deep cleaning, my noise-canceling speakers blasting Coltrane, my phone left face down in the kitchen. When I finally checked it at 4:45 p.m., I found 18 missed calls and a barrage of texts. Evelyn, answer the damn phone. This is a real emergency. I'm pulling into your lot now. My stomach turned to lead. I dialed her back, my hand shaking. What is wrong? I demanded. Where the hell have you been? She shrieked. I had a hair appointment I've had on the books for 3 months. Andrew got called in for a shift, and because you weren't answering, I had to cancel and forfeit my $100 deposit. You're paying me back for that. You called me 18 times for a babysitting favor. I was paralyzed by the audacity. If you can't be there for your sister in a crisis, what's the point of even being family? The guilt trip failed to launch this time. The family drama had finally burned through its last bit of oxygen. I sat on my polished floor and realized I was done. I wasn't just exhausted. I was extinct in this version of the family. I realized this apartment would never truly be mine as long as she knew the zip code. I needed a total surgical closure. My lease was up in 8 weeks. I had intended to renew, but now, I was orchestrating a disappearance. I began browsing listings in secret, hunting for a building with a gate, a biometric fob, and a security team that didn't believe but I'm her sister was a valid pass. I found a 1-bedroom hidden 25 miles away in a quiet, tree-lined suburb. The rent was a steep hike, but the survival of my soul was worth every penny. I signed the papers in a private session on a Tuesday, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The move itself was a surgical operation carried out under the cover of a crisp Halloween morning. While the rest of the world was carving pumpkins, I was loading the final remnants of my life into a nondescript white truck. By noon, my old apartment was a hollow shell, stripped of the sensory triggers that had haunted me for months. I stood in the empty living room one last time, looking at the spot where the wet towels used to lie and where I once crouched in the dark, and I felt nothing but a cold, clinical closure. I dropped my old lock's keys into the drop box and drove toward my new move-in date with the windows down. My new place was a fortress of silence. The security was top-tier key fob access only, thick soundproof walls, and a staff that actually enforced boundaries. I didn't tell a soul. Not my mother, not the cousins, and certainly not the family's resident narcissist. I spent the first week in a blissful, hushed session of unpacking, finally existing in a space that was 100% mine. Then, the inevitable crack in the silence appeared. My former landlord, Mr. Henderson, texted me on a rainy Tuesday. Evelyn, just a heads up. A woman claiming to be your sister was pounding on your old door today. I had to inform her that you'd vacated the premises. She seemed, let's say, extremely agitated. Hope everything is okay. I could practically see Sarah's face in my mind, the confusion curdling into a toxic rage as she realized her playground had been permanently shuttered. An hour later, my phone exploded. 5 calls in a row. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail that sounded like a legal indictment. Evelyn. What the hell is going on? Your landlord says you moved? You didn't give me the new address? Call me back this instant. The family drama had reached its fever pitch. When I finally called her back, I didn't lead with an apology. I moved, Sarah. It's done. How could you just disappear? That is so selfish, even for you. I didn't disappear. I'm right here on the phone. I just changed my coordinates. Where is the new place? I need to know for the kids. I'm not sharing that right now, I said, my voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. I need my own survival space. I need a place where I don't have to worry about the lock turning at 2 p.m. without a yes from me. You're toxic, Evelyn. You're actually ghosting your own blood. She slammed the phone down. But I knew the grand jury, my mother, was already being impaneled for the final session of my character assassination. The aftermath was an all-out blitz of family drama. Within 72 hours, my phone was a minefield of concerned calls from aunts, second cousins, and even our grandmother's bridge club. Sarah had spent her week weaponizing the narrative, telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned the family and vanished into the night. It was a classic narcissist move. If you can't control the person, you control how others see them. My cousin Michelle called me on a Wednesday, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. I heard you had a breakdown and moved without telling a soul, Evelyn. Is everything okay? Sarah is just so worried about your mental state. I had to spend 30 minutes explaining the reality of the boundaries I'd been forced to build, watching Michelle's tone shift from pity to stunned realization. Oh, she didn't mention the locks or the kids using your place as a daycare. She made it sound so sudden. Then came the Thanksgiving ultimatum from my mother. If you don't show up to the family dinner and offer Sarah a sincere reconciliation, you are effectively tearing this family apart. Family is the one thing that is supposed to be unconditional. It's only unconditional if I'm the one doing all the giving, Mom, I replied. I'm not coming to Thanksgiving to be a centerpiece for a guilt trip. You're being so stubborn. You're making a huge mistake, Evelyn. I spent Thanksgiving at Brenda's place instead. It was quiet, warm, and entirely devoid of toxic tension. I didn't have to defend my right to exist as an individual. But Sarah wasn't finished. She started a campaign of digital espionage, sending friend requests from burner accounts named Monica or Stephanie, trying to bypass my security and find my new location via social media tags. I had to go into a full digital lockdown, removing my workplace, scrubbing my location data, and unfriending anyone who was a known informant for the family council. The holidays were a cold war of family is everything posts on Facebook, featuring photos of the 6 kids looking lonely with captions like, learning that some people prioritize their space over their blood. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I just sat in my quiet apartment, watching the snow fall, and realized that the price of my survival was being the villain in a story written by someone who never truly loved me for who I was, only for what I could do for them. The closure I felt wasn't a loud explosion. It was the soft, steady hum of my own silence. The Cold War reached a sudden, medical truce in late January when our grandmother, Esther, was rushed to the hospital. It wasn't a tragedy, but a severe case of pneumonia that left her breathless and hooked to an oxygen monitor for observation. My mother called me, and for the first time in months, the toxic barbs were gone, replaced by the thin, fragile voice of a daughter worried about her own mother. She's asking for you, Evelyn. Please. I arrived the next afternoon, the sterile scent of the hospital corridor bringing a strange sense of clarity. Grandma Esther was sitting up, complaining about the lukewarm broth and the lack of decent cable TV. Her eyes, however, were as sharp as ever. Evelyn, you finally showed your face. I've been around, Grandma. Just focused. Your sister says you fell off the map, that you're having some kind of episode. I sat down, taking her paper-thin hand. I just moved. I needed a different kind of security. She studied me, her gaze lingering on my face. You look different than you did at the last family Christmas. You look taller, like you finally stopped trying to fold yourself up to fit into everyone else's pockets. That observation hit me harder than any guilt trip ever could. We spent an hour talking about her hydrangeas and my promotion, a quiet session of normalcy that felt like rain after a long drought. I ran into Sarah in the parking garage as I was leaving. She was unloading the 6 kids from her minivan, looking more haggard than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was a mess of dry shampooed tangles, and the circles under her eyes were deep enough to hold a month's worth of secrets. We locked eyes across the asphalt. For a moment, I thought she'd pivot away, but she walked toward me, her shoulders slumped. "Visiting Grandma?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Yeah. She's doing better. Evelyn, I don't want to do this anymore." The silence is louder than the kids. "What does not doing this look like to you, Sarah?" "I don't know," she whispered, looking at her brood waiting by the van. "But I realized something. I wasn't treating you like a sister. I was treating you like a relief valve. I made you into a solution instead of a person." It was the first honest sentence she'd uttered in a decade. I felt something in my chest finally undergo a quiet reconciliation. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But the boundaries aren't going away. I can be your sister, but I can't be your backup plan." "I hear you," she said, and for once I think she actually did. 3 months have passed since that parking lot confession. We are rebuilding brick by cautious brick. Sarah actually started seeing a therapist to deal with what she calls her control-based anxiety. We meet once every 2 weeks at a local pizza parlor with an outdoor play area, a neutral session where the 6 kids can burn off energy and I don't feel trapped in a corner. She still hasn't asked for my new address, and I haven't offered it. Trust is a slow-growing vine, and mine was nearly uprooted. I still go home to my quiet apartment, use my private key fob, and lock my door knowing that no one is going to bypass my security. My mother has stopped calling me selfish, though I know she still whispers it to the aunts when I don't show up for every single Sunday brunch. But I've learned to live with being the difficult one, because being easy was slowly killing me. If you're listening to this because you're trapped in a cycle of family drama, wondering if you're the narcissist for wanting a locked door, here is the truth. Setting boundaries isn't an act of war, it is an act of survival. It is the only way to ensure your reconciliation with yourself is permanent. People who truly love you will learn to live within the lines you draw. Those who can't were only there for what they could take, not what they could give. If this story hit home for you, or if you've ever had to disappear to save your own sanity, let me know in the comments. We're building a community of survivors here who know that peace is worth the price of a few hurt feelings. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and closure. Until next time, keep your head high and your locks tight. Your peace is your power.